Okay, hi, this is the Drupal usability meeting for June 11th, 2019. And the only topic that I've seen raised so far was media library overridable metadata.
Yeah.
Who wants to start?
Well, the only people who have a topic, I guess, which is Sean and myself.
Who of you wants to start?
So for those who don't know me, I'm Adam Fanaproxima, unofficial initiative coordinator of media, and I have here Sean B, who is a subsystem maintainer of the media system. And what we're trying to do is, so we have this media library, which lets you, in an entity reference field, you can choose media from your library, as the name might imply, to use in, like, to show it like on a node or something like that. What we're trying to accomplish here is the fact that if you're, say, referencing an image through a field like this, that image is going to have alt text attached, but you might want to override the alt text or the title text or some other like attribute like that on a per embed basis and on a per usage basis. And so that's what we've been thinking about. And that's going to require an interface or user interface, which we talked through yesterday with Christina, and we came up with sort of like back of the napkin sketches, and we just actually put them in Sharpie at the beer garden for yeah, this was smart, for like how we think they should, for what we think they should be like, and we just wanted to run this past all of you people and validate that this is a good idea and that we're not doing anything stupid or missing anything important. So I'll let Sean talk it through since he had this idea. And we're just gonna, like, unfortunately, we're gonna have to kind of hold up the sketches to the camera, which is not
that's pretty cool, actually. Yeah, that's great.
This is why we stole a Sharpie.
Yes.
Did I steal? I meant borrow.
I'll try to explain a little bit what's happening here.
Well, Sean, just real quick, can you hold it up so it is at the top of the, because there's people's faces down below, so the bottom part of the image gets cut off.
Okay. So we have to hold it up a little bit. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Is this good?
That's fine. Yeah, I'm just saying, like, you can't see the very bottom, so just assume it gets you to line with the top of.
I will switch to the bottom part when we get to it.
There's like more than one screen drawn on each piece of paper because we only had 2 sheets.
Yep.
So we'll make sure you see.
You're gonna move it around. Yeah, perfect. Okay.
We'll try to make it work. So basically what you're seeing now is the current widget for the media library, which has the thumbnails with titles below it, the remove button at the top right corner of each thumbnail, and the add media button at the bottom.
Yeah.
Which basically does not allow for a lot of room to add extra things, such as a button to allow people to override metadata, or actually put the fields to override the alt text, for example, inside the same widget. So that got us thinking how to do that properly. Like, one of the things we discussed is to make a totally separate widget, like a more complex widget that allows for more fields or buttons to be added. And I'm going to shift this, like this is an actual presentation. So, okay, I'll try to keep it steady.
Animation.
Yep. So in this version, we present the thumbnails at the left and put the title next to it. And that leaves us room to add more buttons. So we have a separate remove button and a button to override the metadata to allow users to click that. So the metadata button is not actually what it's supposed to be labeled, but it's to give like a representation of how to lay out things, which would lead us to the next screen. And what the metadata button is supposed to do is it's supposed to bring up a modal that is going to look like this. Let's start with the bottom half first. So it shows you which fields you are allowed to override. For example, the alt text and the title text in this case. And below that, you should see the default value of that thing that is actually saved on the media entity. And right next to the default value, you have an override button. And when you click that button, it shows you a field to actually fill in the value. And the override button should probably be renamed to revert or something like that.
when you're editing it. Like, so the idea being like, you click the override button to say, okay, I want to change the alt text in this case. And then if you decide you don't want to do that anymore, that override button has become a revert button. And please don't take any of the terminology literally. This is all just placeholder wording. But you click the revert button and then it like makes the field disappear. It's like, okay, we're going to go back to the default value that we had. So kind of like working with a machine name field.
Yep.
Yep.
And then at the bottom, you have a save button to save whatever you changed. And what we discussed is whether or not this...
Can you move it up a bit so we can see the save button? Thank you.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, I now see that everything is mirrored.
Yeah, is this all RTL for you guys?
No,
No, it's going correctly.
Not.
no, it's
Okay.
good for them. I've got the
Oh, okay,
energy
perfect.
screen version.
All right.
Okay. So anyway, we discussed on whether or not this should be this field should be in the widget or in the modal, because when we discussed the earlier designs of the media library.
Christina just showed up.
Oh yeah. Hello.
Yay.
So yeah, in the earlier designs of the media library, we discussed that like working with the media library should edit the canonical thing and not the per embed or per instance data. But when we were talking about how this should work in a WYSIWYG editor, we came to the conclusion that we wanted to have a similar interface for both the widget and both the CK editor widget, or yeah, the media library widget for any reference and the CK editor widget.
That the workflow should basically
Yep.
be the same, just so that like when you're doing a similar operation, you shouldn't have to contend with two different interfaces that do different things at different times. That it should always work the same way. In both.
Agreed. So the argument there is using a modal in both places will provide consistency. Is that right?
Correct.
Exactly. And we also made a super cool sketch for what it should look like
Yeah, man.
in the CK editor.
Now we're cooking with gas.
Yep. So when you double click or when you double click or edit the image, we discussed this, and like the general consensus was you should arrive at the same place where you embedded the image. So we couldn't bring up this new edit metadata thing. That's why we discussed having a button overlaid on top of the embedded media, where you can bring up the modal to override specific metadata. One thing that also should be added here is that in the current situation where you embed an image in CK editor, you directly see the fields to set the alignment and the caption for the image. And for media, we probably want the steps to be as little as possible in the beginning. So we directly embed the image, and only once you edit the image to the CK editor, you see options to change metadata like the alt text or the alignment, just to make the initial steps and workflow consistent and short, and have this extra modal with the button to override it if you want to.
Yeah. So the idea is to put the thing into the editor, into the WYSIWYG as quickly as possible, and then let you fine tune it as a follow-up action.
Yep.
Yep. That makes
It's
total
a lot
sense.
of
The only thing that doesn't make sense about that, hold on. I guess if you're inserting an existing item, this is not a problem, but if you're inserting a new item, you do need to enter the alt attribute, correct?
What's the difference? Well, the thing I should mention there is the difference is between setting, and we're not going to expose this kind of terminology in the UI, but the difference there is between setting the canonical alt text and the per usage alt text. So the idea there is like, of course, when you upload an image, you have to set alt text on it, and that's the default. But then you might want to override that for just that one time that you're embedding it in the editor, or just that one time that you're referencing it in that field. And so that's
No, I totally understand that, but I'm saying in CK editor right now, if I click the image button, I'm taken to a modal that, where I insert my image, and then I'm forced to enter an alt text before I will see it in here. So I think the workflow you're talking about would only work if I were choosing an existing image, not if I was uploading a new one from CK editor, correct?
When you upload a new image, you get taken to a second step where you need to provide required information, and that could be an alt text and a title text as well.
Okay, so the same screen I see when I add a new media item from that very first screen,
Right.
I'm going to see that here. Okay.
That is, yeah, that part is identical. There's no difference there.
Yep. Well, at least when you so when you create a media item in a entry reference field, or you create an item in a CK editor field, that workflow is the same. But I do see how it can be confusing when you add a new image in CK editor, then see the override button, and then you can immediately override what you just created.
Yeah, so there needs to be an understanding
that could be a little bit weird.
But you're adding something to the media library, and that is a learned aspect that is the canonical information that is present in multiple places potentially.
Yeah.
But yes, that is expecting a certain level of understanding of the user that may not always be true.
Yeah, that's my main concern. I mean, the learn process. People is not always.
But that's the same problem exists in case of the media. Wait, screen. That same problem exists here, right? Like as soon as you add something new, you also have that metadata override button over there.
Yep.
So it's the same conceptual issue, is that as soon as you add something new, you still need the ability to override.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be the same for both the media field and CK editor.
I agree.
Yeah. But that is a challenge.
Yeah, but you're also using the word canonical alt text and title when in the UI we're not saying it's canonical alt text and title. You're just entering the default alt text and title.
I think default is probably a better way to describe canonical to end users, but
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, but this is this text here, the default alt text, that is just like, imagine it says 5 otters, or imagine it says 2 water bottles. Like it's not meant to be the literal text. It's meant to be whatever the default text is, namely that's stored in the media entity.
But just to step back, because you don't have this screen, when someone's adding new media, it just says alt text and title, even though at that moment they're entering in
Yes, that's
the default alt text and title. So they don't know that pattern. They're just like, I'm entering in alt text and title.
Yeah, we could probably make a label default alt text and default.
that sounds like a good.
That we could easily do.
Yep.
Yeah, and like the truth is, like if they don't change the metadata, then it's going to just inherit the default stuff transparently, and that's what makes it the default. So they don't like overriding it as a separate thing that they do.
Okay, well, yeah, and default is a good pattern because we're using that in views. You're setting your defaults for all your views so people understand the word default.
No, let's not do that.
Okay, let's not go down that assumption.
Yeah, content authors do not use views, and they do not know this concept. So it's weird.
for site
views
builders, you
is
just
a shitty example.
It's also not necessary that people are gonna use this functionality to override anything. So in that case, default doesn't mean anything because it's just what it is.
It may just be confusing to some people because they just want to have the alternative text. And
Well, in that case, no, I guess sorry, I had a thought and then it vanished.
I mean, the compromise is you leave the labels the same, and there's some help text that just says, hey, this is a reusable image, and you're entering the default title in alt text. And the assumption is new people read that once, and everyone else will be like, oh, I understand that concept. You don't have to hammer it in the labels. It's just in the help text or description.
So you're concerned about just giving by default the default information on the media?
We're making this assumption that people understand that the title when they go to create media and they enter title and alt text, they're entering in, we use the word canonical, like the default canonical alt text that will be available to all images that then could be overridden. And at that, I mean, I think there's a value in conveying that to someone because like that would help someone be like, okay, I'm entering in a really generic title so that when people reuse it, they have the most useful title. They can, the default title, and they can go in and override it. I think we'd see the issue once we started building out this pattern, and it's just minor labeling tweaks.
So yeah, I think the problem about labeling, it's not my main concern. I mean, my main concern will be the pattern, and I think it makes sense assuming that the 80% of situations will be like inserting that or as understanding that whatever is the label to override or change or personalize, whatever you just introduced there, you want to change that. So I would say that the 80% of situations will be just leaving the default or understanding that you can override that?
So I agree with you, and I wonder why can't someone just insert? They see an image, they insert the image, and then there's a button after it's inserted into both contexts, into the node, node edit form or CK editor. But no, go back to the CK editor. They insert the image, and then they get the option to override. You don't need while they're inserting to say, do you want to override it as you're inserting it? Let them insert it and then come back. That makes a lot more sense to me.
That's not what we're not proposing that you override at insert time.
But then what's that screen, that first dialogue on the flip it over?
This is what happens. So this is after you've referenced a thing from the media library or added one. It inserts it, like it puts it in there with the default stuff, and then you have the option to override separately if you click what we're currently calling the metadata button.
Got it. I got confused by the dialogue. I thought we were in a dialogue mode. Then this makes.
This is not in a dialogue mode. This is after you've inserted it. Then you can click metadata to bring up a modal and do the override as a separate action.
Yeah. So this is the current field widgets,
Mm-hmm.
current media field widgets, and this is the proposed more advanced media field widget to allow for per referenced or per use or per embed, however you want to call it, uses, and to allow that metadata to be tweaked for that particular use.
Yeah, but this is a different widget, so this is both widgets will be available, and the site builder can choose which.
Oh, the advanced, yeah.
So I have a couple of questions. First, how do you switch between those two widgets?
Well, normally it would be a configuration thing when you manage form display for that content
display,
type. Yeah, it would be.
That's
normally how we would do it. There is another. Should I even bring this up? The other possibility.
Yeah. So Wim proposed that we could also add a button to the existing media library widget, so the top one. And I think I saw a design from Christina where she added the drop button on top of the thumbnail.
A drop button.
So essentially the same pattern. So this is, you have text, some more text here below, and this is a media insert, whether it's an image or a video, doesn't matter. There's an override button, which corner it is in or what it looks like, doesn't matter. The pattern is there's a thumbnail and an override button laid on top. And we could apply that same pattern in the existing widgets, this one, and lay it over on top of each of the thumbnails of the media entities that you're
The one difference being that we already have a remove button in the current widget that's in head. We have a remove button overlaid on top of each thumbnail, so we might turn this into like a drop button for like remove or.
Yeah, I was going to say a drop button pattern probably makes the most sense. What sucks about that is that the leading media that you've accidentally uploaded is probably not an 80% use case, but it's up there. Like everyone's done that. Like, whoops, that's not what I meant. X.
Yeah.
Overriding metadata is like I don't even know.
Well, we could make remove the first operation potentially.
I
personally, but you still have to click once to get the drop button, then click again. You know what I mean? It just.
What if it's the first operation though? Because in a drop button, the first one is the one that shows up. You can click once. So
yeah, but
you have to click twice.
So it's still like it's still adding friction. What I'm wondering is if, and Christina's there, so she can shoot me down if this is a terrible idea. What if there was a toggle called could you hold that back up again?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
If there was a toggle on the first thing that said advanced settings, click, and then when you clicked it, it expanded out to look like the bottom.
So transform this to this on the client side.
Yeah.
I think that's a much better pattern than we're changing it at the form mode level.
Yeah, I like that too, honestly, because it.
But you have the show weights button where you can click the show weights and you get a field to change the weight.
So
but what if besides the show weights, so you have like this button to make it advanced, and then we change the display from the thumbnail display to the bottom one. Yeah. Without having to change the form settings or whatever.
In other words,
you can do it within the widget. Yeah.
So by default, it's always there.
So by default you get this. By default you get the top thing, which is what we currently have. Then there is a button that says enable advanced mode, whatever the label is, and it transforms this thing without a page reload, without changing any configuration. Just the author has the ability to choose to go from this to this.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well,
so sort of like switching between tile view and table view.
Yes.
Of the media library.
It would really be like just some CSS changes.
Except requires a page reload and.
But
it'll be hard.
Yeah. So if we are kind of having problems assuming that override is a good word. What good word we're going to use?
That's
Well,
a
that's-
separate story.
that's
No,
a
It's
hard-
hard,
no,
a hard
but
problem.
that's-
Yeah.
No, but actually, just coming up with a word that it actually represents doing a personalization or something
Yeah,
like
per
that.
instance changes. Yeah.
So
Tweaks
having
the
a
font.
drop down where you don't have a parent title for that, it's kind of easier because you can have like 5 things there. But having one title that actually represents everything, it's going to be much harder than just having a drop down with a default option. I'm not sure if I'm explaining myself.
Are you saying that having a button in the top thing to go from this mode to this mode, and that has to have a label,
Yeah.
even though that label implies one kind of action and there's going to be multiple actions available here, that is the problem? So what single label can represent going
Yeah.
from this to this?
That's my concern.
Okay.
Finding a proper label that actually represents everything
Yeah.
below that.
The easy way out for developer people is to say enable advanced mode, but of course that's
Yeah.
a terrible thing to
Yeah, I'm
do.
not really sure.
Yeah.
An editor, actually, you're enabling that so editors, so content editors, probably they don't even have like this label as content managers, or I don't know, even more advanced user. You're going to the really end user. So probably the background this person is going to have with Drupal and advanced Drupal and Drupal terminology is going to be much lower.
Yeah.
This is not even existing pattern, so we're
Yeah.
introducing something totally new.
New
Yeah.
patterns.
I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just concerned about
For the-
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's even harder than using an existing pattern. Actually, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I don't
I
know
understand.
configuration. I don't know. It's just I don't know.
Yeah.
For me, it's kind of difficult, and probably there's people that it's super good with copywriting and they kind of figure out. But for me, the problem there is that it's like a hat with a lot of concepts inside it.
And it's especially dangerous because it could be easy and tempting to add more buttons here, and that the concept becomes even more
Yeah.
muddled.
Then here, country modules.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But we do have like from the media library modal, we already have like this grid versus table icon that lets you switch between the thumbnail view and like a more
More advanced view
rows.
shows you more
I will
things.
not say table anymore, but like rows
It is a table.
of data.
So that is if we make a transition from this top thing to this bottom thing. But if just one thing, so if we
Yes.
look at this pattern and apply the overlay on top of the thumbnail, and we have a button that says override, and clicking that makes that override appear on every single of the thumbnails so that you gain that ability. Okay, Christina's nodding very heavily.
Yeah.
So
She
So
looks
how
really
do
happy.
you jump from here to here? Here. So how do you go?
I don't want to go here. I
Okay.
want to stick with this. Have a button that enables the appearance of an override button on each of these thumbnails, and then if
All
you
right,
click
right. Can
you
you
can-
do this?
this,
Can there be 2 icons? One is the X in the upper right corner. The other is a gear next to it. And the gear can show up on both views. And then the gear pops up not this thing we're looking at, but the second page with the stuff.
But-
Advanced settings.
I don't know if
I-
it's clear.
yeah, I personally think it's kind of it. I think it would be getting very much in the way if it's a drop-down kind of thing, like a multi-click thing. I think if I have the intention of, okay, I'm reusing media and I want to have overrides of metadata for accessibility reasons, usually for this particular context, it seems reasonable to me that I want to have overrides for multiple things, probably. And so me being in the mode of,
Really?
okay, I want to contextualize the uses of media for the uses for the context that we're in. I want to be able to go into each and every one of them really quickly in quick succession. Click override, get the pop-up, fill in the overrides, save, click on another one, do overrides there as well. So that allows you to go through things very quickly without having to click a tiny little fiddly click targets find those and then get it in the same place.
So drop button, you mean, would be
I think it would be bad.
hard, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't meaning a drop button here. I'm gonna.
Very like contextual link-like thing is what you mean, I think.
No. Here.
Well, no, maybe like
I'll trade you drawings.
Okay, now Angie is drawing.
Awesome.
This is great.
Angie's turn.
Angie's turn. And I don't know that this will make sense or not, but oh boy, this is hard. How the hell did you guys do this? Okay.
There was one person managing the paper and another person talking.
Oh my god, me. I got a sick kid here too. She's not going to be much help. Okay, so X is a pre-existing condition. Then there's a gear icon, which kind of looks like a dead spider.
Yeah.
Dead spider does not bring up a drop thing. It's just a button you click, and when you click it, immediately you're taken to the advanced metadata boop boop boops in a modal, and then you change your shit and save.
Yeah,
and then you're
that's that's the same concept but without a label. The question is a gear clear enough or something like it? A symbol, can a symbol represent this? Because that was your concern. Like, what is the concept that the user has to understand to get to overriding metadata? Is a symbol clear enough? And
to me, it's like it's settings. It's like, you know, we know it as metadata, but to them, it's like advanced.
Yeah, makes sense.
So that's how I was thinking of gear. I defer to designers. I think I also have a.
You're shaking her head.
From my anyway.
So
I
I would think first, but for sure we will need to test that. But I would first think on a pencil or something like that, like more edit.
Oh, sure, yeah, pencil, yeah.
Like but yeah, I think an icon will be something useful.
Yeah, I think
But
that makes
anyway,
sense.
we'll need an alt text for the icon. But yeah.
And I think whatever label we choose or icon we choose, the modal where you actually override stuff will need to be super clear about that you're overriding defaults. And I think that showing the default with the override button that you have to explicitly click to override a single item will help.
This is what you're talking about?
Yeah, so
that's
actually showing the default with an explicit button to say, I want to overwrite this default with something else.
Or personalize.
Exactly, will already help, but this modal is where the customize.
Yeah, that's right.
So I wanted to make sure we're on the same page. So we were starting here. This is the media field, and we already have everything you see here. What we will be adding is a pencil icon. Let's assume it's a pencil icon for now with some undefined, as of now, alternative text. Yes. On the other side, there is not going to be, this is in CK editor, there is not going to be a cross to remove it, or maybe that's actually something we could.
Why don't we make them the same in both?
Yeah,
I mean,
so it's perfect.
Is good.
Yeah, okay, so let's assume we bring the cross over there as well, and we again have a pencil icon, and from both places, we go to a
thing that looks just like that.
Yeah, to something that looks just like this with not override but customize.
So from the CK editor, you will go directly to a pop-up that is directly to change the metadata. What about to aligning that to the left?
That would also
that is a separate concern.
We have question marks.
Yeah, that's like that.
To me, I would include all of that.
Talking about overriding the metadata of the media. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I think from a user experience perspective, if we make it, and we'll use pencil for now. I actually love pencil. That's much better than gear.
Yeah.
So let's say we have an X on the top right and a pencil right below it, so that it's harder to click. To me, editing the pencil just means edit, like edit the thing. So I would actually throw the CK editor crap probably below the metadata form if we can.
You mean like the alignment and caption stuff?
Yeah.
So just immediately below this is what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay.
I would.
From a user perspective, it's all editing shit that I can't see.
I know, but Angie, the caption and alt is more common. Like, we should put the stuff they edit more commonly first. I don't think people are going to.
That's fine.
Yeah. I mean, we could go back and forth, but I think we got to deal with the 80% where they insert, they make a minor tweak, align it, and they're done. And that's got to be the first thing they get to.
And what is that also what you want to say, Christina?
Yeah, that goes exactly with that one, because I imagine that you have like an image that have like 20 fields that need to be edited there. So you
hopefully
will
not.
have the left and the right and,
Yeah.
and everything, all this important stuff.
Okay.
And they will say, oh, I can't edit anything.
Okay, so it sounds like we're aligning. Align, damn it.
Well, you will
I'm
say
sorry.
on the paper that we are on the same page.
Oh! Christina wins. Christina
And the
wins.
dad joke award for this meeting goes.
So
Sorry.
I
Oh my
think
God.
we are understanding each other, that we are going to have a cross and a pencil icon. It's going to trigger this thing, and this is for overriding metadata in the media entity. And I heard Jacob suggest, I first heard Angie suggest alignment and caption can be in the same modal. And then I heard Jacob suggest it should probably be at the top since it's a more common operation. I heard Christina confirm that. And I hear no objections, so I think that's a good summary, probably.
Yep,
But here is the thing, though. There is one very important difference between alignment and captioning and the metadata here, and maybe some other kind of metadata for other types of media. And the difference is that this is overriding something that is inherently stored in the media entity, and it's stored in the media library. It's managed there, whereas alignment and caption are purely decorational aspects of how an embedded piece of media appears somewhere in text. So they are conceptually very different, but maybe we can say that they're, as far as the user is concerned, they're kind of the same.
Yeah.
But that is, I want to make sure we are aware of the fact that they are very different.
I'm aware that to the back-end developers, they're different. However, to the front-end developers, I think they all have to do with editing things.
Yeah.
And we have kind of a pre-existing pattern for this, which is when you use settings tray on a block, there's things coming in there that are from block module, that are from other modules, that are from views, whatever. But we treat it all as just block settings, and we just like abstract it all as like this is block settings, and you don't need to know or care where it's coming from. So the idea, I think, is still consistent. It's a per usage, like per instance, settings that you're putting about this thing. And in the media library, it's I guess still per usage. It's just the usage is the global usage. I don't know. But yeah, I feel like, I feel like it's consistent, even if I know it makes people squeaky when they know all the sausage.
I don't feel bad about it. I just want to make sure that we're not like, we at this time, while we're talking about this, are considering the fact that there are different concepts. And so the mental model for some people will probably find this confusing, but if the vast majority of people are going to find this clear, great. I have no complaints.
It's gonna be a borderline. Like if you need to swap the thumbnail of a video and left align it, then you probably don't think like there's so much of a different concept, because the left aligning is how it appears here, and this thumbnail is how it appears here.
Yeah.
And this basically.
What if someone from younger generations comes here and says, I want a plugin on the CKI editor and I want to apply here a filter like the Instagram one, and I just don't want to left and right and alt text, but I also want to apply a San Francisco filter.
But you're trolling us right now, right?
Yeah, totally, but it
Okay.
makes sense. It could be possible. So the point here is like, maybe we end up on a situation where we actually have to separate in tabs, for example, or on separate steps of
Separate
pages
separate concepts.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the point here.
But are you saying that is like a future problem to solve if the problem
Yes.
arises?
I think it's a future problem. Right now, the amount of stuff that we have makes sense to place it somehow together.
Small.
But it's not that difficult to have something in the future on the same page, and we can end up with a super long form.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are people on the phone, on the call, also feeling okay with this, or are there unspoken concerns?
What Christina just said.
Oh God.
What Christina just
Benji,
said is, thank you. I was worrying about the same thing. I mean, we're thinking about title and alt text, and when the modal pops up, there's plenty of room for title and alt text. But are we thinking that we might want to add other things as well?
Yeah.
If the media has a bunch of fields on it, are those also going to be in the modal?
So
Um,
I think the key example that is an alternative thing that is actually realistic is, imagine you have videos and you want a different thumbnail for this particular use. So instead of some text, it would have to have an image upload form that allows you to specify a custom thumbnail for this particular embedding of that video. That's a
Or
different example.
replace the image. You said that this morning.
Replace the image.
Or replace the video. Yeah, just that you're on the CKI editor and you don't want to delete the image. You actually want to replace the media element.
So that's a different.
Yes, I know, but maybe you can get there from the pencil icon.
Okay. I don't want to go there right now.
Sorry, yeah.
But I think Christina's point about the tabs to me makes the override is the less likely use case. So if someone gets in there and they click the pencil icon, being able to change the alt text and the alignment in the first tab makes a lot of sense. And maybe we'll get there, but a second tab, having 2 tabs might be the better approach for scalability, because we don't want scrolling. Now, in the override tab, we might have scrolling, and that is completely unavoidable. If someone's got 10 fields, the modal dialog is going to have scrolling. But to change the title and alt and alignment, it's like.
Well, I should probably mention that currently the way we're designing the underlying API part of this is that it's up to the media type to say what it will allow to be overridden. And by default, that's going to be a very, very small subset of things.
Okay.
So images, we're only going to allow alt and title to be overridden, and that's going to be enforced at the code level. So there's no chance of people adding, I mean, maybe in the future with entity embed as a contrib module or something, but in core, we don't want people to be like, yeah, I want to have 25 fields here to override. We just don't want that for precisely these reasons.
But there's no technical reason why they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
No, there's no particular technical blocker except for enforcing one.
I think to Jacob's point, if there is a complex need, then we have a pattern that we can apply to solve it.
Yeah, so the storage is no problem.
Yeah. And
we currently enforce the widget to only show the fields we want to in the modal, but there's no reason a contrib module couldn't say, so you have configured 20 fields on your media type. Let's expose all those fields and allow you to override every single one of them if you want to.
Yeah, that would suck, but I mean, we leave that to contrib.
But technically, like we are not in the way of that.
Yes, that's true.
I mean, video seems so ripe for 20 fields. I can't, like, let's think about it. You're embedding videos and you want to set the starting point, or you want to set you have one video and you want to be like, embed it at this starting point in this language with this thumbnail. And I've just threw those out of the top of my head, but for a rich site, that's possible.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's really possible. I think for the more advanced use cases, we're generally going to, like, one of the things Wim and I have sort of generally talked about a little and kind of nodded our heads to is like, for the most, we want to support the most basic and common use cases in core, and anything more advanced, we are totally okay with putting that in contrib.
But not making it impossible from core.
Right.
But
Not making,
just to be
contrib.
fair, like I've seen a lot of cases where an image media type contains a caption field on the media type.
Yes.
So then you would have the situation where you have a caption field from the CK editor, you have a caption field from the media type.
That's a special case that we sort of have to make work, because then the caption doesn't need to be defined inside CK editor anymore. It needs to be automatically inherited.
Exactly.
But
I'm just saying that this is a pretty common use case where you have a field on the media type.
Yeah, but we can make that work.
It should
That's
probably be overridable per instance as well.
Yeah, that's fine.
So you're saying that is a common use case of a custom field in air quotes, like something that somebody configured and added.
Like manage fields, add field underscore caption.
And they want to have that work as well.
And have that overridable as well. So I don't think it's an edge case at all.
No.
So that is going to Jacob's point of, like, I can easily think of something that results in many fields being overridable in this dialogue. And you're saying, well, I know off the top of my head of another one that we're doing all the time.
If we go the route where you have like fields that are manually added to media type through the interface, if we allow some way of exposing them as overridable fields, then like it's up to the site builder to configure which fields should be overridable and which are not. Like, for example, taxonomy fields should probably never be overridable, because it's not that we should enforce that through a technical reason, but site builders probably shouldn't do that. But a caption field or a description
Mhm.
field or
Mhm.
like any type of text,
Mhm.
this copyright field maybe. I'm not
Mhm.
really sure.
Yeah.
But there could be reasons for people to overwrite.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess the concern about the scrolling and the modal, we already have that problem. Like if you bulk upload 5 images,
Yeah, in the media
Yeah,
library.
that happens.
Well, the media library opening with 20 images in it or more than 20 images in it will already let you
Yeah,
need
there's always
scrolling.
so I'm saying like to me this feels like we already decided we're okay with scrolling. Like we're not lovely with scrolling, but the modal already has to accommodate that
Yeah.
for
It's
the
inevitable.
whole upload case.
That's an unavoidable one. I just got the tab UI starts to try to avoid it.
Yeah.
That's and CK editor when you're in there, they avoid scrolling. Like Angie, I agree with you. If you got 20 images, you got scrolling, but all other use cases, all other modals in CK editor specifically avoid scrolling. They'll do like for example the advanced link module has like a ridiculous number of fields, so they use tabs to avoid the scrolling because it's a little easier for someone to understand everything. Instead of having to scroll, they just hit the tabs.
But how, I guess I don't know how tabs are going to help. Like tabs between metadata and fields
Yeah.
will still run into the same problem with video where you have a start timestamp and a image URL and like what I mean. The modal's only going to accommodate like 2 fields in the modal, and if you have more than that, you're going to scroll no matter if you're on tabs or not.
But
I'm not opposed to tabs at all. It doesn't seem like that's going to do much.
The benefit I see is you have an image, you click on it, and the first tab is the alignment and the caption, and that's it. And the second tab is override. 80% of the use case is the alignment and the caption, and then the other 20% are people going to the override tab. And when they go to override, it's a one-time thing, generally.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So you're saying the default experience would be a non-scrolling, just presentation level thing, and then in addition to that, there would be an override that might scroll for 47 page scrolls, but at least you clicked into it first.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And you said the right word, presentation. That first tab being the presentation. By the way, I'm focusing on CK Editor. The presentation in CK Editor, where what you see is what you get. You click, you open a dialog, and it's the alignment and caption right there. Is what people would expect as the first thing. And then if they want to tweak the metadata, I mean, they can't even see. Let's put it this way: they're tweaking metadata they can't even see in the CK Editor. Am I right? Or generally speaking,
Know what it is. They probably it's good. There's a good chance they know what alt text means.
yeah. Okay.
If they can't see it doesn't mean they don't know it's significant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wouldn't just place things on tabs by default. I wouldn't assume that people will understand that easier, and I wouldn't concern that much about the scroll in a dialogue because that's going to happen anyway. Almost ever with small screens.
Yeah.
Or just people that doesn't use the browser on full screen. I mean, it's not that easy to avoid. Whatever we do, it probably will end up scroll at some point.
I feel like non-scrolling is a nice to have more than something that should really dictate a lot of our decisions or even.
And
Could we
it's
have like collapsible field sets? Because we use that pattern already in the media library.
We could totally do that. I was thinking that, like an advanced details that you can.
So you have like the
stuff.
presentational fields, like in an open field set.
Yep.
And below that, you have like overridable fields in a closed field set. So you can, instead of the tabs.
that would be called customizations then probably.
Yeah, and the benefit of that to me isn't so much about avoiding scrolling as avoiding cognitive overload. Because if you open the thing and you get shot in the eye with 25 fields, well that sucks.
Not 25, but by default it would be 3 or 4 for images, for example. That's already quite a few.
I never exaggerate ever.
But if we make like the manageable fields also, if we give the user an option to present those as overridable as well, then it could be easily more without us being able to control the outcome.
Thoughts about field sets, the use thereof? Like one open field set that is containing alignment and caption by default, and then a second field set that's closed by default called customizations, where you can override alt text, you can override title, you can override the default video thumbnail, whatever it is.
So I think that if alignment and caption are so frequently used in CK Editor, that we shouldn't have to click the pencil icon to see those settings. Those should just be there in some other location. And then we could have more consistency with the media library, which wouldn't have caption and alignment.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Like, what do you mean?
So
by
maybe
consistency
an
with
extra
media?
icon for the presentational things?
I think that's cognitive overhead.
Yeah.
You need to learn a lot more things.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
it'll be like which I forget which button does what.
Yeah.
No,
Well, alignment's visual in the context.
No button. You know that when you add the image to CK Editor, you have alignment and caption staring you in the face. You don't have to click a pencil icon to see those settings.
I wonder where that would go.
Yeah,
Like,
how would it be
can't
staring you in
visualize
the face? Can you specify that?
One
Well,
paper nearby
it-
that you
You
discussed
can
something?
technically show the form field for alignment on top of the image.
I want
Or
I think the less you obscure the image, the better, because the idea of a WYSIWYG editor is
Yeah.
supposed to be what
Okay,
you see.
well,
There's also a
another
tremendous
thought.
number of
We
edge
have
cases
this
there.
alignment button, but we technically in the CK editor already have this alignment buttons,
Yeah, they
No.
can highlight the whole
No.
thing and hit center.
or not?
We don't. This is the default. This is Drupal 8 freshly installed with CK Editor enabled with an image inserted using Drupal 8 head. The image is right aligned, but that isn't possible through the default toolbar. There are no alignment buttons enabled by default in the CK Editor toolbar.
So we consider that a valuable feature to align images more so than align text. So we don't want to by default allow to align
Yeah.
text.
We do not allow that by default, no, because in principle, text alignment should be controlled by the theme, and so
Yeah.
you have to trigger the dialog, which I guess right now is broken because this isn't broken, and so this is how it works today. You have to, this is where you can specify alignment, and yes, alignment buttons, if you have them enabled, work, but they are not enabled by default, and that is a crucial thing. So you would have to have some facility on top of the image somehow to be able to trigger them directly, to have them staring you in the face, as you put it. So that would be the complication. So we cannot assume that those buttons exist in the toolbar over there. My mouse cursor is now moving. So that means you have to have them on top of the image itself, or you have to do it in the dialog.
Or you don't get a feature of image alignment if you don't
Yep.
enable the align button.
That's another option. You don't get alignment unless you enable the alignment buttons, but that is not something
I
we
think
used
that's
to do in the past. Yeah, this is not.
It's also a bit logical.
That's principle of that is not the principle of least astonishment, in my opinion.
Yeah, no.
Well, you already have like the ability to customize all the classes and things you can enable in the CK editor. So for example, if you want to create buttons in the CK editor, you just add a way for people to style a link as a button.
Mhm.
So you already, like if you want to build like more advanced layouts through WYSIWYG
You
fields.
use layout builder.
Sorry, no, but like through
I mean,
CK editor.
associate classes, HTML classes, and then have the styling apply. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that already happens when you want to.
But we also don't have that styling ability enabled by default. That is something you have to enable.
No, but it's advanced features. Like by default, you just.
I don't
But
know.
that's explicitly not what we've been doing with images for the past 5
Yeah.
years. For the past 5 years, it's been
Yeah.
possible to align.
But is that a
and-
reason to continue with this pattern?
If we don't want to break backwards
Yeah.
compatibility and continue to offer the same experience for images moving forward, but have them not be one-offs and re-upload the same image over and over again, but instead allow them to achieve the same via the media library, then we sort of have to continue.
But I also think that like aligning an image left or right is not an advanced thing, and no one is going to like having to think of that as an advanced thing. They are going to resent that. They're going to really,
Yeah.
Drupal? You're making
That
me.
is why those buttons are there, is because when we first put image support into CK Editor, we didn't have any extra things. And those were the two things that people heavily pushed back on and were like, look, dude, like 80% of the time when I add an image, I need these things.
Yeah, I mean, everybody is going to want that, and I think that.
But is
putting
that
it in
align
the
right? Is that a float right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's adding a class under the hood that has a float right,
Yeah.
but it's like a
But yes, it does
general general class that is not specific to CK editor, or there's nothing happy basically. Okay, so we sort of got sidelined here, but do we still feel it's like, okay, your original concern was aligning and captioning are sort of separate things, which I understand and agree with, and you wanted them to be available directly.
Well, I think the concern was more that when we started this call, we said what we want to do is we want to make sure the CK editor and the media library, or the entity reference field, experience for overriding metadata is the same or as close to the same as possible. And if the CK editor one is stuffing more fields in, whether it's above the form or whether it's on a separate tab that's selected by default or whatever it is, we are creating a diversion in those two things. But maybe that is fine because we have the justification, which is that CK editor is a what you see is what you get situation where people do want finite control over the visuals, but maybe it's not. I don't know.
Yeah, to that point, if you are using the media field that is purely structured data, there is no presentational control whatsoever. So of course you don't get alignment and captioning.
It wouldn't make sense.
It wouldn't make sense, but it would also be technically impossible for us to even offer that. But you're absolutely right that there is a difference in experience, but it's still a very recognizable and maximally shared experience, if you will.
Yeah. I think the goal isn't to eliminate difference, it's to minimize difference. It's to keep them as consistent as possible, but absolutely deviate where it makes sense. Like the whole point of this is to get it to be like, to make sense for people. And like, it's not going to make sense if like, because this one over here does it one way, CK editor can't get something that's logical for it. So to me, it's like minimize deviation, but do it if you have to. So for me, alignment in CK editor is like a no-brainer. And so is caption.
So, yeah, I'm comfortable with that, but Benji, I think you were the one who raised the original concern about the visual presentation and the overriding stuff being in the same area, whether it's on two separate tabs or not. Or did I make that up? I thought Benji was the last one to kind of raise a concern.
Yes, yes. And I think the pencil icon on the image when you're in CK editor should do the same thing as the pencil icon when you're in media library. And stuff that CK editor controls should be somewhere else, like maybe from the styles drop-down menu, or maybe we should change our minds about whether alignment buttons are in there by default. But I think if CK editor is controlling it, we should let CK editor decide where to put it. And not have it come up in the same place that the title and the metadata, which are sort of internal to that media item.
They're not internal to that media item though, because the alt and title that you're showing in CK editor is for that usage in CK editor. So there's nothing, only the default.
But I understand what Benji is saying. It's getting to that question I asked at the beginning. Like, this is conceptually one thing, and alignment and captioning are conceptually a different thing.
Yes,
and that is what it's about.
So that's the thing that the drop-down button was helping with. I mean,
is it though? Because then you have two different dialogues that get triggered.
Yeah, you can have two different dialogues, but you start from the same point.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's not that I'm saying let's just go back to the drop-down. It's just that you're directly going to two separate places, and when you get there, you actually just start at a different workflow. I mean, probably a tap when you're there to just jump to the other could be useful, but anyway, it could be like.
But that would technically be the same as having a third icon, though.
Yeah, that's what about
like a stop.
Yeah,
This paintbrush thing, and a pencil, and I don't know.
Yeah, so no, the problem that if we are more than the cross and edit icon, you are opening the Pandora box. That's for sure.
Well, why is 3 so much worse than 2?
Because one is close and the other is edit, and all the other things you want to put there. You put there a third
different kinds of editing.
Yeah, that's not a thing we should.
But I have seen this pattern. This is important with the edit. I've seen edit button like in fancy formatters. They have like a little edit button, and you click it, it opens up to a drop down, and then it has a line left and right.
Yes.
Like, by the way, that's the solution to our align left and right issue. I'm not saying we go there. That's like a whole separate UX discussion, but the ideal situation is you're on an image and it says move to the line left, align right. That's the most direct way to
Are
tell
you saying we have a cross to remove a gear icon that has a drop down that says either edit to do the metadata overriding, this stuff,
yeah.
or align left, or align center, or align right, or align none, or
I know that gets complex, but yeah, that is. I've
Okay.
seen that pattern. People have done that pattern, and people are getting more familiar with that because it's like I've seen it used successfully.
okay.
That's a whole other can of worms. I do want to step back, Vim. You did a demo and you clicked on the image and it opened the dialog. And we need to remember that's what happens in CK Editor, which I think is great because we're putting a gear icon, a pencil icon in to get to the dialog. But right now the behavior is you click on the asset, it opens the dialog. The pencil icon is just a visual indicator.
I'm not sure if it's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we were talking, but in CK Editor, it opens, right? You click on the image of the asset in CK Editor. Doesn't it open that dialog?
Yes. So you're saying this behavior. So I'm closing the dialog now, and I'm hovering the cursor over. Wait, let me actually choose.
Yeah, and you click.
And I double click. Yeah.
Yeah, that's important to remember. That's what people expect. Like we'll have the two icons, the close and the edit, but they're going to want to hover the asset and click.
Right. That's also what I thought, but actually, this person over here, Sean, he surprised me because he never knew until today that it's actually possible to double click. What he always did was right click. Oh, actually.
To be fair, I never enabled the image button in CK Editor.
So he right-clicked and then clicked the contextual menu item, and you get to the same place, which is fine. But so just to indicate that it's an assumption of yours, also mine, by the way. I assumed everybody did it this way, but no, that's not the case. So checking our biases, including mine.
And the contextual menu, this is a funny going down that rabbit hole. Contextual menu doesn't show you left or right align right now on the asset.
Oh no. That's in the dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's because this is a linked one, you can unlink as well, but that's a separate thing. Yeah, it's usually just cut, copy, paste, and trigger the command that gets you to the dialogue. That's almost it's not a pattern in CK Editor or rich text editors in general, as far as I know, to be able to right click on things and then have them do something. It's usually through buttons, and Christina's nodding again.
Yeah.
Visual. It's like it's a cue.
Yeah.
It's right there. It's not
Yeah,
like, I had to double click. I mean, I like the idea of having kind of I personally am thinking like 2 buttons is like the maximum I personally am comfortable with. But that being said, the pattern of having a few operations, maybe 3,
like
max
quick
4.
edit.
Kind of like quick edit.
I personally think at that point it's clearer than to have what Benji was suggesting, which is a cross to close and then edit for override image. Sorry, edit for or customize metadata, override metadata, and then a separate one for the presentation. But Christina said that is like basically a hard no-go. I could imagine that working better than having a dropdown with like easily 5-6 options, because then you need to express everything in that single dropdown, which is itself also kind of a challenging UX, I think.
Well, I assumed there would be a drop-down for edit presentation or edit metadata, and then you'd be taken to.
Okay, sorry, Angie, can you say that once more?
Yeah, sorry. I assumed the drop-down, if we did a drop-down, would only have 2 options in it, which is either edit presentation or edit metadata. But now you're back to, or delete if you're going to pull it all into one thing. But, now again, you're back to having to click extra times no matter what you do. Because I think currently CK Editor shows you the presentation stuff right away, does it not?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So you have to select a caption and an alignment in order to even put an image in there in the first place. So there's no extra clicking. In that respect, it's like it's the same amount of clicking that you have to do. If we start sticking the image in there with no prompt, and then you have to click once to bring up the hover menu and then click again to get the thing.
Exactly, that's a lot of clicks.
That's annoying. Yeah.
But yeah, I totally get where Benji's coming from. But maybe it isn't as much of a problem. That was what we were saying initially. I also thought exactly what Benji thought. Like, isn't it a problem that we're mixing concepts?
Yeah.
But then what we were saying before is that is kind of developer-y mindset, I think was the conclusion that we were getting to at that point. And that as far as a content author is concerned, they're all just kinds of customizations, and it doesn't really matter where it's stored and how it's conceptually really managed internally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but it sounds like we are going in a circle a little bit.
Yeah, and but like all the other layouts of your body field is configured through the buttons in the CK editor, except for the image alignment that we hide in the model for some reason.
But
So-
all buttons are about textual representation, not
necessarily, because you said if you have the alignment buttons, you can align your image as well through those buttons.
if the image is selected first. So then it's a shortcut to actually interact with the dialogue. If you
But
will.
then you
So
have
it's-
like two ways of aligning an image.
yeah,
Is that
You're-
clear that you're actually doing the same thing with the drop down or the
you see it
alignment
happening
buttons?
right away. So that's why it's clear.
So one way is just doing that by the paragraph of whatever it displays, and the other one is by the properties of the image
The
element
image itself,
itself.
yes.
So it's different anyway on HTML. So they are different things, aren't they?
No, if you select the image,
Probably I'm just confused.
if I would go and enable the alignment buttons in my CK editor instance, then
Yeah.
if I first select the image and then use align left, then the image itself would be aligned left. So what would that mean?
But
It would get
it's-
a class equals align dash left class,
Okay.
and that is respected both in CK editor and on the front end. So we did that special integration again for usability reasons 5 years ago, and we haven't had complaints. But then again, we don't have alignment buttons enabled by default.
So if you place an image and that usually it's inside a paragraph and you align the text on the right, is the image going to be aligned on the right anyway?
If it's images, that's a special case in case of HTML, because images are the only kind of HTML elements that can be both block level and inline. And so if the image is inline, it follows the paragraph, and if it's a block level thing, it's a separate thing.
That's right.
So
in media's case,
that's
it's all
a whole level
block
of nightmare.
it's not.
Yeah.
There's technical reasons why.
So yeah,
Just forget about that. Yeah.
that's a really complicated edge case.
I think we're at time.
I think it's fair to say we got the consensus about the awful approach, and the thing that is remaining, like we have consensus about this is the current media widget. We're adding a pencil icon to trigger a dialogue that is sort of looking like this to override metadata. The thing that is a remaining concern, I think, is whether we can do the same pattern for CK editor, because the concern is that alignment and caption, so the question mark items here, whether those can live in the same override metadata dialogue or not. That seems to be the remaining point of contention.
Yeah, that's the crux. And I think the best way to get clarity on this ultimately would be to like mock up both of them. Maybe even just paper mocks, I don't know, but mock up both of them and show them to content authors, which are going to be hard to find at dev days. But I don't know, like, it would be neat though to actually just test it, because right now we've got a bunch of people who know Drupal really fucking well, all giving their opinions about what they think people who don't know Drupal at all are gonna think. You know what I mean? And it'd be great if we could somehow test that, any of those assumptions.
So when you say mock it up, you mean like
There's broad alignment though on +1 for the same action to trigger the same thing.
Mhm.
So we don't build two different experiences for CK editor versus the other one. A proposed way of triggering that mechanism is through an extra icon on the image. I think it remains to be seen whether or not that's going to fuck people up or not, but that's a proposed way to doing it. I think a second proposed way is just move everything under contextual links, and then when you click it, it's, you know, you got the remove there, you've got the edit metadata there, and then if you're in the CK editor context, you've got the edit presentation there. It just sucks because that UX regression to where we're at today. But we are.
Thanks for the summary, Angie. That helps. But while you were talking,
Yeah.
I thought of a reason that the contextual links approach might yield a situation of sadness.
Oh no.
The reason is in-place editing is itself triggered through a contextual link.
No
So if
way.
you start in-place editing a body field and then you have nested contextual links effectively. So you start in-place editing a body field, then there's an image in there, then there's a contextual link on the image, and then it's very confusing.
Why it can look like the same, but not exactly be something inside something inside something.
No. It wouldn't actually be recursive, but it just mental model-wise, it would be very confusing. You started in-place editing body field through a contextual link, and then there is another contextual link that looks maybe slightly different, but behaves the same. So there's an icon and a drop-down with options.
That's a pattern. You're editing something.
Okay, maybe that's a reason to then go with that.
I go to the
In-place editing in the WYSIWYG editor, I hope.
No, but you have
But you
we
only
have
have the
like
icons in the WYSIWYG editor.
And that's one reason we want the pencil icon rather than the gear icon to bring up the modal. Because the gear icon is used for contextual links.
Right. That's a very good point to not go with the gear icon. Yeah,
I agree.
To have like this is a different level at least to some extent. Even though the gear icon for contextual links maybe arguably should be the pencil icon, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah, that's a visual pattern. You're going to edit something.
Yeah.
So whatever happens, these crazy people, the engineer people that is going to code something there.
This is why I'm glad we have Christina.
It's just like I don't really care. I just want to click an icon button and have options there.
Right.
I don't really expect that I come from somewhere that I have actually done that. I just
Yeah, it's just like
if you do that like 5 times, maybe it's Inception, but otherwise.
Okay, but then the remaining concern I think is that you need a lot more clicks than you do today to change alignment or trigger captioning, because it's always going to require a click on whatever the icon is, and then a click on one of the options, and then you get to do it.
I don't think we should be so afraid of clicks.
Okay.
I mean, yes, but not like, I mean, that's
clarity
not
over
really-
the.
That's what we said this in
Yeah.
Barcelona. It's like minimizing number of clicks is good, but having clarity is better.
Okay, one last remaining concern with a contextual link-like pattern. We do not know what the actual physical screen size of the media embed is going to be. So it's very feasible that there is actually a tiny media embed that has a massive, in comparison, contextual link-like pattern applied over it, and we cannot just scale it down to not result into something visually confusing and jarring, because then the click target and touch target becomes so tiny that it's impossible to use.
I think the quick edit links are technically a bit default, or not, or are they overlaid on top of it?
Yeah, they are overlaid.
Okay,
But
you could technically put some white space and just put them above.
white space,
Instead of overlaid on top of them, just add like this.
Just put it
tiny
just
bar
slightly above them.
Yeah.
Ever so
yeah, I
slightly.
think that's more like
it's
an edge case.
mini
Like,
tab.
Yeah, I also think that's kind of an edge case.
Okay, so for now it sounds like we have several reasons to go with the contextual links pattern. So I think that should be what we try first then, probably.
Now, Angie, when you say mock them up, do you mean wireframes or prototypes?
I mean, whatever it is, the least amount of work to get a non-technical person to understand what you're asking them. So, like, if we think we can do with paper prototypes, great. If we think we need to do HTML and CSS, great. But you know what I mean? Maybe something like that.
Okay.
I have a question though: how much more effort we need to put into this right now? Like, I think we should write up what,
11:45. Like,
because we de-scope this as a must-have from the initiative, right?
yes.
so
So I think let's not worry about it right now. But it would be good while all of our heads are in the space to like write up, okay, here's what we agreed on, here's where there was disagreement, we're thinking maybe the next step is this and this, and then just leave it at that, unless you like have nothing else better to do.
So much else better to do.
Yeah, I figured you did. So like I would basically put a pin in it. It's like we've had a discussion. This was the initial gut feelings of everyone involved. And I think the next step is to actually test something with non-technical users. But I think we should do that after we get all the must-have blockers out of the way.
I agree, and I can summarize that in the issue tomorrow.
Okay, so my main concern is if we really need to do wireframes here instead of prototypes, I probably won't be able to do that until Thursday or something like that.
That's fine.
So I'm not really sure how.
Yeah, that's more than fine. Christina, it could even be like 2 months from now, or
This is
you know what I mean? Like,
Okay.
This
yeah,
was
we're not.
specified
I don't
yesterday.
think- I'm pretty sure as of yesterday, we all agreed this is not in the must-have list. So
Yeah.
if you have bandwidth to give design help on anything, I'd rather you spend that bandwidth on stuff that is in the must-have list that we know we need to get done in order to make this stable. Because we know this issue is not it.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Cool.
We just lost Benji, but I just wanted to thank Benji, Jacob, and Angie explicitly for the very constructive thinking along and feedback.
Yeah,
No
this
problem.
That was really productive.
I vote that from
Sorry,
moving
we-
forward, all hand-drawn UX diagrams from now on.
Yeah.
Everything should be hand-drawn. That should be our.
with shaky hands as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was awesome.
Sean needs to draw them over beers, and Wim needs to hold them up. It worked really well the first time.
That was great. Awesome stuff, guys.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
for
you.
taking the time.
Bye.
All right,
Yes.
have a good night, everyone.
Enjoy your week, man.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.